I dare someone to try to cap my base. Oh my god, is that Swifty? What? Swifty, where? Haha. You lying son of a bitch! What's up guys and gals, Tosan here with a Subtlety Rogue RBG Ninja Capping Guide. A rogue can perform a few different jobs in RBGs, but ninja capping is one of the best ways to carry your team to victory. Sometimes you're in a group that just can't win team fights if their life depended on it, so it's up to you to take a base so they don't have to actually win a team fight. So I'm going to show you some tips and tricks to do this, and hopefully help you become a master of ninja capping. Now, before we get into the actual ninja capping tactics, first I want to say, knowing your enemy is super important. I know this is a general rule of thumb, and you've probably heard it many times before. This applies to PvP in general. But it's extremely important to know how all the other classes work, because if you don't know what each and every class does, you won't know how to perfectly plan your attack and counter their abilities. And this next one, of course, kind of ties into that, what I just talked about. But keeping track of the enemy trinkets and CC breakers is also very important. For instance, if you know the enemy trinketed a cheap shot or a kidney shot or a sap, then you know that you can full blind him and get an easy cap. So those are the two main starting points. Now let's get into some examples. Alright, so let's start with the most basic strat for capping a base. Remember, it takes 6 seconds to cap a flag. This means your best CC options for capping a flag are sap and blind. Now, a lot of players aren't dumb enough to stand right next to the flag so you can sap and immediately cap. The problem with sap capping is, if the enemy is far away from the flag, you don't have enough time to sap them and run to the flag and start capping, because by the time you get to the flag, the sap only has, 4 or 5 seconds left a lot of the time if they're standing far away. Sometimes, if they're not too far, you can actually pull off a sap sprint cap, and that might be just enough time. So first I'll show you a basic method for capping on somebody. For instance, me and this rogue here met at about the same time at this base. So lucky for me, I'm in stealth and he's capping the flag thinking he's safe to take it. So remember, a human rogue will only have one trinket, so he can only trinket sap or blind once. Although he does have his human racial, so if he uses one of his trinkets, there's a 30-second shared cooldown, but the human racial only works on stuns, so try to keep track of things like this. If he trinkets a stun with his human racial, you can still blind him and cap, because there's a 30-second shared cooldown. Like I mentioned earlier, it's very important to keep track of the enemy's trinkets and their CC breaker cooldowns, so you can use your abilities accurately and get a flag cap. So this is a very basic scenario. I catch the rogue capping, I sap and right click the flag. He knows that I'm going to get this if he doesn't trinket. However, this puts me at a huge advantage, and he's pretty much screwed at this point, because if he trinkets the sap, I can full blind him. What he'll try to do is trinket the sap and interrupt the flag cap, and then probably vanish, and then, try to sap me over and over and do the same thing to me if I'm stupid enough to stick around. So there's a lot of things that can happen in these rogue versus rogue situations. It's really hard to give you just a one-size-fits-all strategy that works against rogues all the time, because sometimes he'll catch you in a stun and you have to hope that he doesn't kill you in that stun so you can save your trinket for blind and stuff like that. So you have to know what the enemies can use against you, and you also have to kind of get in their head and predict what they're going to do. Here it's really obvious. He's not going to just stand there and let me cap in his face, because that would piss off his team. So I know for sure he's going to trinket this sap. And if he does trinket the sap, I'm going to be ready to blind him instantly. The problem is sometimes you won't always be able to blind them instantly. But I do know that he's going to have to trinket and attack me and then vanish. That's his only hope of stalling this cap. He would have to trinket, hit me with something, and vanish instantly before I can blind him. So you have to be quick in these scenarios, but you do have the upper hand. So as long as you don't screw it up, you have the advantage. He trinkets the sap and I instantly blind him, because I know that I had time before his vanish, because he has to hit me. Now normally I would guaranteed get the cap here. Unfortunately, he had a buddy show up. So I'm not going to immediately panic and trinket the bash, because see, the rogue messed up and tried to attack me instead of instantly capping on the cyclone. So they're giving me a gap in between CC to Fan of Knives and interrupt their cap. Now that I'm on DR for Cyclone, which also shares DR with Blind, he can't blind me, and I'm also on partial stun DR. So unfortunately, this is not a proper ninja cap, this is a botched cap. So I have to go for plan B, which is to kill the targets. You could always resort to just killing the targets, because this is why rogues are so good at ninja capping. Because not only can you CC and get ninja caps without fighting sometimes, but if something goes wrong like this, you can very oftentimes end up just killing the targets depending on how good they are and what classes they are. I know this is a ninja cap guide and that was not a successful ninja cap, but it almost was if that guy didn't get help, and I just wanted to show the basic scenario when you can sap somebody. Now, although sap and blind are your best options for capping, it is possible to kidney shot cap somebody. Kidney shot does last 6 seconds, so if they're not playing Relentless and they're not orcs, it is possible to perfectly time a kidney shot while right-clicking the flag at the exact same time. But it's very hard to time this exactly right. It is pretty unreliable, but it does work sometimes. So here, I sapped the adaptation off from this paladin. This paladin's not a very good base defender overall, but as you can see, it barely cuts it close. There's always a tiny, tiny little gap right after the kidney shot to be able to, for them to be able to interrupt you. So it's highly unreliable, but with latency in your favor, you can actually pull it off sometimes. Now, demon hunters are actually put on base guard duty very often due to their high mobility, and they're just annoying in general. But the good news is they only have one trinket, so if you can get them to trinket, you can easily catch them in a full blind and get the cap. Now here's the problem. Any smart base defender in general, especially one that only has one trinket, is not going to stand anywhere near the flag. Because as you saw earlier, when you can catch the enemy right next to the flag, you can sap and cap easily, guaranteed, and therefore they have to trinket the sap into a full blind, and that will guarantee that you get the flag, right? So if they have half a brain, they're going to stand very far away from the flag, making it impossible for you to sap cap them. This means they can save trinket for blind, and as you know, the kidney shot capping is pretty unreliable. However, due to the threat of blind, demon hunters can't afford to trinket a kidney shot. Now this guy is a tank demon hunter, so he will easily survive my stun lock, which leaves me with very few options. If I stun lock him, since he's a tank, he'll never have to trinket it because he'll easily survive the stun lock, which means he can always save his trinket for blind, and I can't sap cap him from this range, right? So here's where the trick comes into play. This tactic works very often against demon hunters. Due to their high mobility, what you want to do is come out of stealth and pretend to start capping. This is going to force him to react and leap towards you. So you re-enter stealth because it only has a 2-second cooldown. Then when he's closer to the flag, you can hit him with that sap, and you should be close enough pretty much every time if you do this to be able to cap. This is going to force him to trinket the sap because he knows you're going to get it for sure. He imprisons me, I trinket it, I full blind him, and I get the cap anyway. Once you've gotten the trinket from him without using blind, it's pretty much guaranteed, because no matter what, even if he sits really far away and just tries to throw glaives and stuff at you, eventually he's going to have to get close enough for you to blind cap. Like I said, demon hunters guard bases very often, especially at higher ratings. This tactic I've had work up to, 2200 MMR. So it is a very reliable strategy. Demon hunters and rogues are the two classes that I find base guarding the most at high rating. Now if you're doing LFG, which most of you probably are, and you do, YOLO groups, it gets even easier to cap because a lot of the YOLO groups don't have a perfect composition and they don't always have ideal base defenders, so a lot of the time you fight classes that aren't as well equipped as rogues or demon hunters to guard bases. But since demon hunters are extremely common flag defenders, this is easily the best trick or strategy to have up your sleeve. Now, of course, against Havoc with something like Fell Rush into Glaive Toss, it can be very hard to reliably do this bait trick sometimes, especially with latency, because sometimes you start capping and if they react instantly, they can Fell Rush and throw a glaive at you before you can get the re-stealth off. So if they're not super far away, I highly recommend using Smoke Bomb to protect you just in case. That way they're forced to either Fell Rush to get themselves in combat, trying to Fell Rush through the Smoke Bomb at you, or they have to use Metamorphosis to jump on top of you. Remember, Fell Rush will dash directly in a straight line, and the damage happens instantly. Even if the animation takes, a split second for him to actually do the dash animation, the damage hits in a straight line instantaneously. So if you are in his Fell Rush path, no matter what, it's going to put you in combat insta. So there are two ways to avoid the Fell Rush from hitting you. Gauge the distance accurately. Know how far away you can be with the Fell Rush not hitting you. Like in this case, I know he's quite far away, and one Fell Rush definitely won't hit me. Secondly, when you do the fake cap, sometimes you can sprint and zigzag to the side to get out of the Fell Rush's path, and then not get put in combat so you can sap him right next to the flag. So here we go. I'm going to Smoke Bomb, and then I'm going to start fake capping. Then I'm going to re-stealth and walk to the side to get out of his Fell Rush path. This is going to allow me to sap him, forcing him to trinket. Now this is best case scenario. I've successfully faked him out and baited him into sap range near the flag so I can sap cap. This means he has to trinket or I'm gonna be able to get this base. And if he trinkets, then I can full blind him. Now, instead of Fell Rush, sometimes they're going to use Metamorphosis and try to land right on top of you. This is why when you fake cap after smoke bombing, you want to immediately try to sprint if you have it and strafe to the side and get out of range, because if he lands on you and hits you with the AoE on impact, it's going to put him in combat and you won't be able to sap him. Lucky for me in this case, he decided to use Fell Rush and I was able to avoid it and sap. Now unfortunately, I'm going to predict his trinket almost perfectly and try to blind him on it. Unfortunately, my timing was way too good. I basically instantly blinded him on his trinket, or I would have, except Metamorphosis makes you immune to CC. So this Demon Hunter was smart. He trinketed and instantly used Metamorphosis and immuned my blind. So here's the thing though, this is my screw up. Even if that Demon Hunter made a good choice here, the situation is entirely in my control if I don't make such a stupid decision. Because the thing is if I just let him trinket, it's better to wait a few seconds and see if he metamorphoses or not. And when you know he's not deciding to meta, then you can blind him at any time you want. He has to time this exactly perfectly to be able to do this. So as me being greedy and trying to be cool and freaking insta-blind him on his trinket, I had great timing, but he just used meta instantly. So if I was just patient, let him trinket and use Metamorphosis, I could have just blinded him right on top of the flag and I would have definitely gotten the cap. Also, he might use Fury of the Illidari, his artifact weapon, right when he lands with Metamorphosis, which would stop me from capping as well because it would do damage, right? So the way to prevent getting screwed up by this is you can wait for him to do it, then you can Vanish Cheap Shot or Shadow Dance Cheap Shot or Mark for Death Kidney to guarantee that you can connect the blind without AoE. So let's say I Cheap Shot him right when he uses Fury of the Illidari. Then I can just blind him out of the cheap shot and have no risk of getting interrupted on the cap. So basically, if you execute the first part, the smoke bomb fake cap into sidestep sap on the flag, if you execute that right and catch him in the sap, it's in your control and you have no reason to not get this flag unless you screw up like I did. Once you catch him in that sap, it becomes in your control, so just be patient, catch him in a CC that you know he can't interrupt you with anything with, and then that flag is yours. However, even with the screwed up blind, all hope is not lost. I am a rogue and he is a squishy-ish Demon Hunter, so it is entirely possible, now that he has no trinket, to stunlock him to death. Unfortunately, his blur procs, which isn't the biggest deal ever, but he also had a health stone. So without that health stone, I probably would have managed to kill him, but he also had help coming along the way. So unfortunately, it didn't work out this time. But you did see the smoke bomb fake cap into a sap works like a charm. So if you master this routine, you will get so many free bases off of Demon Hunters. This can work against a couple of other classes too, but it's mainly good against Demon Hunters. Now here's a Demon Hunter who I capped on before, and he kinda knows about this trick already. I did get his trinket from him earlier, so I know he has no trinket, but I don't have my smoke bomb, so I kind of reset. So another way you can do this is, do the fake cap like normal, run away, re-stealth, but he didn't fall for it. However, he's not that far away. He's just close enough that I can sprint and max range sap him and make it back to the flag in time. So this is why it's really important to be aware of the distance that they are away from the flag, because sometimes if they're just close enough, with sprint you can manage to get a max range sap cap. Now another thing to keep in mind is Demon Hunters are decently easy stunlock targets. If they have the talent that automatically activates Blur when they get low on health, you're not going to kill them in a stunlock typically. But you can get them extremely low and then, use Evasion and Cloak of Shadows and survive long enough that when the Blur ends, then you can finish them off. So, instead of trying to do all this cheeky bait cap sap stuff, you can also just go for the kill and force them to trinket a stun or die. So if you ever see a Berserker buff, this is going to make it so much easier because doing 30% more damage is going to terrify them. So this Demon Hunter probably sees how much damage I do in one Shadow Strike, and he's like, holy crap, he has the Zerk buff, I'm totally dead here if I don't trinket. Also notice he uses Nether Walk. This means he doesn't have the Auto Blur talent. That means his blur would not automatically activate and I would have easily 100 to 0 stun-locked him with the Berserker buff. So trinketing here was the only option he had. But because he trinketed, I can now full blind him and get an easy cap. Netherwalk only makes him immune to damage, remember, but you can still put them in CCs during it. So I get him with a full blind before he gets too far away from the flag, and then I get the easy cap. And now he has no Netherwalk, and he's in a CC and he can't activate Blur. The stun DRs come up, and I get to easily stun lock him and kill him anyway. So as you can see, there are various ways to go about capping on Demon Hunters. Now I know I've covered a lot of Demon Hunter stuff specifically, but that's because I run into them as base defenders more than anything. Dealing with other rogues can be tricky, and rogues are another very common base defender. The way you should deal with rogues is usually you sneak around and look for them first. Chances are you won't find them in stealth unless you get really lucky, or if they're just sitting in a common, obvious spot. Usually I'll scout around and try my luck in finding them in stealth first. If you do though, chances are if you find them in stealth, you're not going to be able to sap them and cap because they're usually not going to be standing right near the flag. So typically if you find a rogue in stealth, your best bet is to try to stun lock, kill him as hard as you can. This will either force him to trinket, making him susceptible to blind, or you might just kill him if he's greedy and holds his trinket. Luckily, most rogues that I fight are not that good at doing a perfect stun lock burst sequence, and I usually survive the stun lock and can turn it around on them and end up just winning the 1v1, even if I give them the opener when I try to cap their base. This is where your 1v1 skill against other rogues is going to come into play. Luckily, I have only run into like maybe one rogue that actually knows how to do a proper stun lock and kill me inside a stun lock if I don't trinket. The risky part about trinketing, however, is even if you do trinket the first stun lock, this makes you vulnerable to blind, and they can blind and sap you and stun lock you again and probably kill you the second time. So if you do trinket a stun lock, you have to be very careful to vanish and not get caught in that blind if you can. A lot of rogues panic and screw up the 1v1, so here I'm spamming my sap macro and I get really lucky and find the rogue in stealth. He panics and he trinkets the sap. This is a big mistake. However, he did vanish on my cheap shot, which means I'm not going to get a good stun lock on him. If he trinketed the sap and I got to maybe resap him and then open on him really hard, I probably would have killed him inside that. Now, these 1v1 scenarios with rogues vary greatly. There's so many ways things can happen. So this rogue decides to panic and blind me. This is a mistake though. You should pretty much, if he's the defender, he should start with a stun lock and try to force me to panic trinket. Then if I trinket, he can put me in a blind, sap me until the stun DRs are off into a second stun lock. But see here, he screws up and he blinds me first. So plan out what you're going to use your trinket on. Here I'm not going to freak out and panic and trinket the blind because there's no point. I'm the attacker, so I'm really in no rush. He's the one who needs to defend this flag, not me. So I'm going to save my trinket for his stun lock, then he won't have a blind. This means I can easily trinket his stun and not get hit with any more CC except some DR stuns. Now remember, I recently cheap shotted the rogue, so he's going to open on me and I'm going to trinket. Normally I would immediately dance on him and start stun locking him and probably kill him. But I'm actually not going to do that. I'm not in any real danger because I trinketed the full kidney shot. So instead of trying to stun lock him while he's on DR, because that won't work, I'm going to drag him closer to the flag. I want to bait him to get closer to the flag now that he has no trinket, so I can get a full blind into a cap. When you know the enemy has no trinket or CC breaker, the best thing you can possibly do is blind them, and it's a guaranteed cap. Now that I own the base, and I know he doesn't have a trinket and he's off stun DR, it's time to kill him. Now the farm and all of its delicious chickens belong to me. Now, you don't usually get this lucky and find the rogue in stealth, but if you do, then it should be easy. Otherwise, the defending rogue has a big advantage. So if I don't find the rogue in stealth, what I usually do is let him open on me. Or you can also fake cap and re-stealth and spam your sap macro, and maybe you'll get lucky and sap him as he's approaching you to sap you. Otherwise, I usually just let rogues open on me because a lot of the time they're not that good at doing the stun lock. So if they open on me, I can very often trinket their CC, blind them, and pretend I'm going to cap, and then immediately vanish when they trinket and then stun lock them to death. You have to be really careful with the timing though. If you're not really good at these 1v1s, you're probably not going to cap on other rogues very often, because the defending rogue has a huge advantage. So that's pretty much it for the cheeky tactics. Sometimes there are flag defenders though that you can't just straight up CC and ninja cap on. Sometimes to steal a base for your team, you have to just duke it out with the defender. Luckily, sub-rogues are one of the best 1v1 classes in the game, so it's usually not that hard. Hunters are pretty squishy. I'm usually not that afraid of 1v1ing hunters, and you honestly don't see hunters base guarding that often these days because of the fact that they're pretty much going to get crapped on by rogues 1v1. All they can really do is stall and try to buy time until one of their teammates can come and save the day. Warrior is another class that can be tricky. Usually, you can just straight up 1v1 them and kill them very easily. They don't have any extremely good defensive cooldowns, and again, if they trinket your stun lock, you can full blind them anyway, so usually they have to sit your full stun lock. You'll rarely see warriors on defense because they don't have a lot of CC breakers. Sure, you can't sap a warrior because of Zerker Rage, but there are tactics to get around that. You could do a fake cap, and when he comes in you sap him and you pretend to cap again, and then he Zerker Rages out, and maybe you can vanish and wait, and then while his Zerker Rage is on cooldown, you can probably sap him and then force him to trinket and then blind cap. The problem is this takes a long time because you have to wait for the sap DR, and this usually gives the enemy team a long time to send reinforcements, so it's not reliable. So usually when it comes to warriors, I just straight up 1v1 them and kill them, because if you have your cooldowns, there's no way you should lose to a warrior 1v1. A lot of the time you need to learn to be adaptable though, because situations can vary widely, so you want to think on the fly. Remember, not all situations are the same. Now, Warlocks are tricky because they have a pet, so a lot of the time you also just have to kill them, but generally we 1v1 Warlocks pretty well. So I'm going to sap the Demon Hunter to buy some time, and I'm going to dance on the Warlock and kick his ass. And then I sap the Demon Hunter 2 more times, and I kidney shotted him. I'm basically treating him like a healer and trying to cross CC him while I whittle the Warlock down. But what happens is the Demon Hunter says, screw this, I'm going to trinket the kidney shot and go after the cart. Because this guy wants to go run carts. So he actually abandons his Warlock partner. Now the Warlock had to trinket my stun lock as well because he knew he was going to die if he just let me do a perfect stun lock on him. So, now that the Demon Hunter pieced out and ditched his Warlock friend to defend here, and I know the Warlock has no trinket, I cloak and I vanish. This way I can sit in stealth as long as I need to until the Warlock exits combat. So I've never come up to this situation before, but I have an idea of how I can cap this flag. Normally with the Warlock so low, I would rather just kill him. However, he's going to use a health stone and go nearly to full health, so I'm like, crap, 1v1ing him without cloak and all this stuff is going to be hard now. I don't even have Shadow Dance charges, but I have an idea. I'm going to sap the Warlock now that I know that he has no trinket. I'm going to blind his pet, and I'm going to cap right in his face. There's a lot of weird situations that can occur when you're trying to ninja cap bases. Sometimes it's a different class defending, sometimes it's multiple players defending. You won't always be able to pull it off, but a lot of the time you can. Anyway guys, this topic could go on and on. If I had the footage, I could probably extend this video quite long because there's a lot of different variables when it comes to ninja capping bases. But, like I said, Demon Hunters and Rogues are the main defenders that most people use, and the other classes that aren't as common, you can usually 1v1 and just kill pretty easily. So I'm gonna end it here. These ninja cap tactics can work anywhere from 1500 rating to 2200 plus rating. A lot of the time, even the higher rated players have somebody defending who's not that experienced with these kind of strategies and tactics, especially the Demon Hunters very often get caught off guard. Ninja capping is an art, and it's not always going to work out either. There's going to be a lot of the times that you fail and you don't get a base, but that's fine. If you practice and get good at it, you can single-handedly win your team a lot of RBG matches. It's a good way to make up for a team that doesn't have a strong team fight. Now, although you can pull this off at higher rating, obviously the higher rating you get, the harder it's going to get to ninja cap against more competent enemies. But these strats are especially useful if you're just joining LFG YOLO groups. So if you play a rogue, I hope you found this useful, and if you don't play a rogue, maybe it'll be useful for defending against rogues. Either way, I hope somebody out there found this video helpful. If you did, don't forget to give it a like, and if you hated it, well, feel free to hit the thumbs down and tell me I suck. Either way, I appreciate the time you took to watch this video, and don't forget to check out all my other guides in my guides playlist. Thanks for watching, and peace out.